for Clinton there. I said that, after it broke, I wasn't going to give another 2-hour and 15-minute speech, so I taped a 40-minute short version, and I said I just took out all of Clinton's stories and cut it down to 40 minutes.
You told that to Carlos.
I told Carlos. That's who I told it to, Carlos. Yeah, that's why Paula's job is to keep on. So we'll see. Keep on keeping on. So, oh man. Well, anyway, now, actually, when I was talking to Clinton, he mentioned that recently he watched the movie again. Have any of you seen the movie of Prince Caspian?
No.
You've seen it? And it is a good movie, but it does sort of have to make a lot of changes that really change the book. And one of the things that changes is that, first of all, at least modern moviegoers don't like long flashbacks. And right here, you've got 3 chapters about the 4 children, and then we have like a 3-chapter flashback about Prince Caspian before we bring them all together. And in fact, they're not all brought together until past the halfway mark in the book. And I think modern audiences, again, they don't want the long flashback, but they also want to meet the children and Prince Caspian right away. So with that sort of restriction, I thought they did a pretty good job. Basically, and what I was saying to Clinton, it's kind of funny because Prince Caspian has shown the horn, and he's like, only use this in great danger. And like 2 minutes later, okay, no. But that was the best way you can do it to bring them all together. But what that means is we miss the whole early childhood of Caspian growing up. And so we almost sort of have to miss a lot of that dimension. And it's kind of interesting because I can't prove that Lewis had this in mind, but I think he might have, is that Prince Caspian is a little bit more complex in terms of its narrative structure than The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, which is straightforward. This has a long flashback. And those of you that know, and I know Marcy does, and Paula, because they were both in that class, with the Iliad and the Odyssey, the Iliad is straightforward. But does anybody remember, do you remember, Marcy, what happens in the Odyssey, what strange narrative trick Homer does? I wonder if you remember that. Oh, that's right, I forgot. You weren't in that first class. You were in the first class. Yeah, that's right, you only came for the second one, that's right. I know if you remember, but in the Odyssey, you may have read it in another class, the first 4 books are all focused on Telemachus, which is the son of Odysseus. Then when you get to books 5 to 8, it's like the whole story starts all over again, and we get to hear what Odysseus has been doing at the same time as his son has been going on his journeys. So books 1 to 4 and 5 to 8 of the Odyssey happen simultaneously. And then books 9 to 12 are a long flashback, and then the rest, 13 to 24, go forward. And so Lewis might have had that in mind. Okay, we're doing the second book. Let's now be a little bit more complex in our narrative. Not as crazy as Quentin Tarantino. Are you a fan of him? He loves to do circular stories and all sorts of strange things and simultaneous action and whatnot. So Lewis is having a little bit more fun here. And it can work. I mean, the one they did for TV, BBC TV, did it this way. And there's a good radio program where they act it out. And, the Trump and the dwarf is telling the whole story. But again, it doesn't quite work for it. And one of the things we miss is the young Caspian. So let's just jump right to chapter 4. By the way, did any of you read this for the first time not knowing the story? Yeah. How long did it take you to realize what was going on? Kind of cool? Like, did you start thinking about it when Prince Caspian, escapes? He gives him the horn. And that's when you start maybe thinking about it. What's going on? And it's just kind of neat. The first time you read this, you're slowly piecing it together. And anyway, I just think that's fun. I think he does a pretty good job with it. But let's turn to chapter 4, which is page 334. Page 334, chapter 4, right in the beginning. And it starts, you can almost imagine 1, 2, what 4 words coming before Prince Caspian lived in a great castle in the center of Narnia? Can you imagine 4 words coming before that? Famous words that you heard when you were a kid a lot? A long time ago, or once upon a time, I was thinking, right? A long time ago is for well. Long time ago in a galaxy far, far away, right? Or once upon a time, a long time ago, right? Way back in the beginning, there is a fairy tale element to this story. And have you heard this story before, where you've got a young prince whose uncle has killed his father and seized control? Does that sound like a rather famous, maybe Shakespeare play? You see it? Yeah, it is Hamlet, right? Hamlet's uncle Claudius has killed his father, Hamlet Sr., and taken control. And really, Hamlet is of age. I mean, it's not even like Caspian was a boy. Hamlet is a college student. He just came back from maybe even grad school, right? And I imagine him all dressed in black, but you've got a little bit of white there, so that's good. But I imagine Hamlet all dressed in black, coming back from Wittenberg, where the Protestant Reformation started, interestingly. So it's that story. Didn't Disney tell that story too? Wasn't there an animated Disney movie that told the same story of a kid whose uncle overthrew his father, seized control?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, it's the Lion King, right? And some people call the Lion King Hamlet in the jungle, you know. But it is a sort of archetypal story that we've seen before, and again, it becomes a different story in the movie, because in the movie, you may have noticed, all the kids have been aged by like 5 years. It's supposed to be 12 or something here. Caspian maybe 13, but in the movie, he's 17 or 18. So first of all, that means whether you like it or not, there's got to be some little romance between Caspian and Susan. I mean, you just can't. It has to be once they're that age. By the way, I discovered when that movie came out that every woman I knew from age 10 to 80 was in love with Caspian. I don't know if you like that actor, but all the girls like the actor.
I didn't see the movie.
Oh, you never saw Billy Barnes? His name is. He plays a much less likable role in what is it called? Westworld. If you've seen Westworld, the first season, he plays a very unlikable character. But so it's different. Also, what's different is in the movie there is a revenge motive there, right? Where Caspian wants to capture Uncle Miraz and kill him, but that doesn't happen in the novel because he's still too young. All it says in the novel is when he heard that his uncle had killed his father, it sort of gave him a strange feeling, and then it leaves it at that. But in the movie, you have to have that moment. And if you've seen the movie, you might understand this, that the best line in the movie that wasn't actually spoken is when Prince Caspian comes into the bedroom where his uncle is, and he looks at him and says, "Hello, my name is Prince Caspian. You killed my father. Prepare to die." Did you get that?
It sounds like Dracula.
That was the Princess Bride. You remember the Princess Bride? Because for some unknown reason in the movie Prince Caspian, they gave Caspian a sort of Spanish accent. And then in the third movie, he loses the accent. It's gone if you watch Voice of the Dawn Treader. So I'm like, I keep waiting for, what's his name? Inigo Montoya to kill my father.
That's
But
the most interesting name in the world.
oh yeah.
My name is Nico Montoya.
Yep.
Me and my father prepare to die.
This is great, and he runs away. Amazing. But anyway, so we've got this young boy who's grown. Oh, there he is. Good. They said they kept you late, huh?
Yeah, it was like our last lap was 6 o'clock. So.
Oh, there we go. No problem. We're just starting. We just said that it's a little bit different than the movie. So they start going back and forth, and just a couple paragraphs in, it's on. It's still on page 334, third paragraph. Well, boy, we must soon teach you to ride and use a sword. You know that your aunt and I have no children, so it looks as if you might have to be king when I am gone. How shall you like that, eh? I don't know, Uncle. Don't know, eh? Why, I should like to know what more anyone could wish for. All the same, I do wish. What do you wish? I wish I could have lived in the old days, said Caspian. He was only a very little boy at this time. Up till now, King Miraz had been talking in the tiresome way that some grown-ups have, which makes it quite clear that they are not really interested in what they are saying. We all know about that. But now he suddenly gave Caspian a sharp look. Hey, I keep thinking this guy's from Canada. But anyway, hey, what's that? What old days do you mean? Okay, so up until this point, he's not really listening to poor. I mean, Prince Caspian might be like 7 or 8. He's really young right now. He's not really listening, maybe even younger. He's not really listening to him. But all of a sudden he says, I wished I lived in the old days. What? What's that? Suddenly he's interested. And poor little boy, if he was older, he would have known to keep quiet, but he rushes in. Oh, don't you know, Uncle? When everything was quite different, when all the animals could talk, and there were nice people who lived in the stream and the trees, naiads and dryads they were called, and there were dwarves, and there were lovely little fawns in all the woods. They had feet like goats, and that's all nonsense for babies. Only fit for babies, do you hear? You're getting too old for that sort of stuff. At your age, you ought to be thinking of battles and adventures, not fairy tales. Hey, be careful. I'm going to trip on that thing. Good. They told me you were coming late. Don't worry. That's all nonsense. And he says, oh, but there were battles and adventures. Wonderful adventures. Once there was a white witch, and she goes on and kind of gives a recap of Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, which is very helpful. All right. What's going on here is so true to today. Did any of you go to like secular schools for undergrad? Okay, because I went to all secular schools. I didn't even know what a Christian school was growing up. So I went to Colgate, I went to University of Michigan. And oftentimes they talk about, and it does happen sometimes, you'll have some really, really secular professors who will attack your faith. But what they very rarely do is engage you in a debate. They don't stop you by, trying to logically show you the flaws in your religious belief. They just use what weapon?
Fear.
Fear, and that fear comes from ridicule. In other words, you make fun of it. It's just for babies. So for the Christian point, Jesus is Santa Claus for adults or something like that. And it is very, very effective. Notice that that's all nonsense for babies. Instead of trying to disprove it in some rational way, it's just, that's for babies, okay? Only children believe in that. Adults believe in this. And Lewis understood that. He grew up in a very, very secular age in that sense. And he wants to show him that, no, I'm going to tell you about the real adventures. And the kid's like, no, but there were better adventures back then, okay? There were talking animals, and they were fighting and all this sort of stuff. So Lewis really understands sort of modern education. And he wrote a book called The Abolition of Man. It's partly about modern education and how it uses, he doesn't talk so much about ridicule there as just being dismissive, okay? And any kind of claim, whether it's faith-based or has to do with the arts, or has to do with morality, is all just subjective. And if you want to talk to me about real facts, talk about science or math or engineering or business or something like that. So something I mentioned, one of the questions I asked, what's so important is, go ahead, go take it. Oh, you can't see me, thank you. Anyway,
Yeah, that's better.
and one of the questions I ask is, whenever you read a book like this and you get a character like Uncle Miraz, you want to immediately say, oh, he's Hitler, right? And to a certain extent, the White Witch has a little element of that, okay? But my argument is he's less like Hitler and more like Richard Dawkins. Now, does anybody know who Richard Dawkins is? Good, he's the famous new atheist, as they call them. They call them the four horsemen of the apocalypse. That's Richard Dawkins, Christopher Hitchens, who actually died a few years ago.
Didn't Dawkins die a few years ago as well?
Who's it?
Dawkins?
I don't think so. No, that's Stephen Hawking you're thinking of.
Hawking,
Yeah. Stephen, that is. He died fairly recently, too, a couple of years ago. It was, so those two, and it's Daniel Dennett and Sam Harris. Those are often considered the four. They call it, I don't know who came up with that cute title, but the four horsemen of the apocalypse, right? But what I'm getting at here is he's more like a new atheist because he is trying to erase the past, okay? One of the ways you do that is by convincing everybody that the entire Middle Ages was what? What was it like?
It was
Make-believe.
Say it again?
Make-believe?
Yeah, well, make-believe, but the Middle Ages was there, but what's wrong with it? How do they teach us to think about the Middle Ages? What do they teach us to call it sometimes? The Dark Ages, okay? Dark, backward, unenlightened, brutal, cruel. And there was some cruel things in the Middle Ages, but nothing comes close to the 20th century in terms of actual cruelty and mass killing and things like that. Nowhere close to that. And the one thing, again, we always talk about, Inquisition. First of all, the Spanish Inquisition was actually the Renaissance, but even then it wasn't what we're normally taught. But even there, it was the 20th century that gave us mind control, okay? Where even your thoughts, and of course the famous book that talks about that is 1984. Now that's fiction, but that really happened. Like if you've ever heard of the Gulag or the Chinese re-education camps during Mao Zedong and all that sort of stuff. And by the way, this is really scary, but I was proud of my son. He says, I refuse to see Mulan. And it's not only because apparently it was terrible, but apparently at the end of Mulan, they're thanking all the Chinese police and workers where they made that movie. And where they made that, nobody seems to know this, but over the last 10 years, there's a sort of large, but not large compared to China, but a significant percentage of Muslim Chinese that we call Uyghurs. And they've been there for a long time. And the Chinese have been just systematically wiping them out. And I don't think it's so much a religion thing as an ethnic. I'm not exactly sure what it is, but it is genocide, is what it is.
Slave labor.
Yeah, use them as slave labor. Some are killed, some are... I mean, this is like going on and nobody seems to care.
Well, they're in the re-education camp.
Yeah,
Yeah.
And
this is so terrifying.
they're
And nobody knows about it.
formatting how they think, you know.
Part of their reform is extremely cheap labor that they farm out.
Yeah. It's just amazing. Only one die and things like that. So this is just, it's amazing what's happening. And nobody seems to know, right? And so you erase the past, right? You know, this never happened. This is foolish. This is backward. I mean, I think I'm going to mention that in an opening video I sent you, but one of the things about C.S. Lewis is he tried to remind us that everybody in the Middle Ages knew the earth was round. I mean, I think I mentioned that. It was Lewis's way of helping us to reclaim some pretty amazing things that were done. And they had their problems, but they had their strengths just like we do. And again, as we go through this, Uncle Miraz is someone that is trying to get rid of the past, just dismiss it as a fairy tale, as only for children. Let's grow up and be rational and logical and whatnot. And what's really amazing here, if you go on, I'll just show you. He goes, all these things that were happening, right? And when he mentions Aslan, Miraz said, who's he? And Lewis says, if Caspian was a little bit older, he would have realized that this was a good time to be quiet. But instead he says, oh Aslan, don't you know? We're on page, 335. He says, Aslan is the great lion who comes from over the sea, who has been telling you all this nonsense. The nurse. Look what he says. Stop that noise. Stop it. And never let me catch you talking or thinking either about all those silly stories again. Miraz not only wants to crush the resistance, he wants to crush any hope, any story that Narnia was ever any different. That there was a time when animals could talk and trees could walk and rivers were alive. And all of that story about the four kings and queens and Narnia and Aslan and the White Witch, all nonsense for babies. Just a fairy tale that never happened. So this is what I mean by that. There's a deeper level. What he's doing is a little bit more insidious. And to show you Lewis kind of has that in mind, basically about 1,000 years have passed in Narnian history. But because our world works on a totally different time frame, what only was 1 year in our world is, he never quite said, but it's about 1,000 years have gone by. And there's one place where Edmund says, boy, we're like Crusaders or Anglo-Saxons coming back to modern England. In other words, we're like medieval people coming back to England. And he has crushed that. Just a good example, I don't know if you study these things, but the European Union, when they put together their preamble, they excised any mention of Christianity. As if Europe is not a creation of the Catholic Church, right? They just literally expunged it. So it's not even there. And so they were really careful, like on their money, they would only put something that was more secular, like a picture of Galileo or something like that. And they would put Michelangelo, but not the Sistine Chapel, that kind of thing. And again, it's an attempt to wipe the slate clean and refuse us. And one of the things he does here, he says, there never were those kings and queens. How could there be two kings at the same time? And he goes right on. Okay, Lewis here, because he often writes about this, probably has in mind what's called biblical higher criticism. And they might say something like, no, the resurrection can't be true, because if you look at Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, there are little discrepancies between them. But actually, that's what should happen, because the Gospels claim to be eyewitness accounts. And if I was like a judge and I was listening to all the people, let's say you were all witnesses of the resurrection, you were Mary and you were Peter and all that, and I asked you to tell your stories, if every one of you gave me exactly the same story, word for word, what would I probably think as a judge?
It was fake.
Yeah, it was fake. It was what they call collusion. You all got together and figured it out. Now, if I listened to you and you all told wildly different stories, then I wouldn't believe it. But if everybody's telling stories that complement each other, that work together, that suggests that there's truth to that. Now, a lot of modern apologists talk about that, that way of looking at it. What would a judge think about this? So here he's trying to do away with that and basically find a contradiction and throw it all up. But there's no reason why there can't be more than one king. There was a high king, and then there were another king and two queens underneath. But again, I want you to see that even though the children audience might not get this, Lewis is doing something a little more complex here. He's showing how the modern world often tries to squelch the past and teach us to dismiss it or look down upon it or whatnot. And Lewis was, again, he was a sort of apologist for the Middle Ages, a defender of the Middle Ages, to try to bring it back again. And all of that stuff, all the stories we loved have been crushed. There's people that like to do that. Even if it may be true that it wasn't true, like maybe George Washington didn't cut down the cherry tree. Some people now think that was invented later, but some people almost have a sort of glee in trying to crush any story. Have you ever seen that? You come on people that they like revel in a kind of cynicism that wants like, I couldn't believe it. HBU brought this guy here and he talked about the Messiah. I'm talking about the one that was written by Handel's Messiah. And he gave us a whole speech about how, well, actually Handel wrote the whole thing just to make money. As if that somehow dismisses the beauty or truth of it. I mean, we all have to make a living. Okay? I write books that I make money from, but that doesn't mean I don't believe in the books or I'm cynical or, but I always forget, why? Why do we do this? Why do we have this sort of cynicism that wants to crush, or this idea that the more cynical you are, the more wise you are? And Lewis was big about keeping that sense of wonder, so we can see through those eyes of innocence and awe and wonder. So again, I just want you to see that Mraz is a little more complex than most villains. Again, he's not going to have a deep psychological part to him, because again, that's not what he's writing. He's still writing children's literature. But he's not just a simple bad guy. He is someone who embodies a problem with the age. I mean, haven't you ever heard someone actually say that? Oh, those medievals were so stupid, they thought the earth was flat. I mean, first of all, even if they thought it was flat, does that mean they're stupid? I mean, if they go with what they know, maybe they're not stupid. I mean, but like I said, that wasn't even true. But it is true, though, that they thought that the earth was at the center. But that wasn't because they were stupid. That's because that's what their eye told them. They didn't have telescopes and all. And that was the best guess for what it is right now. Right? These things change, but they make us, I mean, I'm just amazed. Paula, do you remember this? In the old, did your husband ever have ulcers?
Yeah.
You did? Do you remember what they told people in the old days? If you have an ulcer, drink a lot of milk. And then all of a sudden they turned around and said, no, that's the absolute worst thing to do. But don't you remember when they used to say that? I guess their concept was the milk would coat you or something. But now they've known that's actually the worst thing. I mean, they change their mind constantly, right? Anyway, it's really funny.
No, I was just going to say, because I learned that that's why Christopher Columbus went out.
Right, yeah,
Because
we
the
learned
earth
that.
was flat.
And like I said, then that's just simply not true. Everybody told him that it was round, but it was bigger than you think it is. Columbus was wrong. I'm glad he was wrong. But he didn't know. And I don't know if I mentioned that in the first video, but you know that Galileo, who was so smart and discovered and showed us, he thought that the tides were caused by the rotation of the earth, not by the moon. So he got things wrong too. It's amazing. And you do understand why they didn't believe the earth was moving, is because if I'm on a ship and I throw something up, if the earth is moving, shouldn't it land a foot behind me? Now, they didn't understand that our whole atmosphere was moving with us. But again, that's a pretty scientific way of understanding. It took a long time to figure it was something different than that. So they weren't doing it because they were ignorant. They were actually scientists, but they just didn't have access to the full knowledge and the right tools to allow you to do that. Right? I mean, a good example is Darwin thought that the cell was just a mass of protoplasm. He had no concept of the unbelievable complexity of the DNA of the cell. Maybe he might have changed his mind if he lived today. I don't know. But anyway, this beginning is just, it gets to us. And the poor little boy, he says it was his nurse, and so she gets taken away. Right? And we are going to see her again, but that's left out of the movie. It has to be left out of the movie because we don't have the baby, the little boy, and so we never meet the nurse. And what's really cool is he goes from the nurse to Dr. Cornelius. How many of you would like to be taught by Dr. Cornelius? That would be really cool, right? And you notice that I told you in that opening lecture that C.S. Lewis first had that nurse of his, that Lizzie Endicott, who filled his mind with all sorts of fairy tales and wonderful stories. And then he ended up with Kirk, who is that kind of Dr. Cornelius, although he was tall rather than short. But again, it does follow Lewis a little bit. You go from the nurse to the tutor. And it turns out that the tutor's wonderful, Dr. Cornelius, right? And he begins to tell the truth to Caspian about who he is and where he's from. And he takes him way up onto the high tower. This is page 338. It's about the middle of the chapter, page 338. And he takes him up to see a conjunction of two planets. It seems to be the Narnian version of Mars and Venus, these two planets. And as the boy is watching them, did anybody pick up what he is afraid is going to happen? Oh, no, won't they? It's really funny. He says, are they going to have a collision? He asked in an awestruck voice. He said, nay, dear prince, the great lords of the upper sky know the steps of their dance too well. For that, look well upon them. Their meeting is fortunate and means some great good for the sad realm of Narnia. And we're not going to have time today, but after you all, almost all of you, do your first thing, before we start Voyage of the Dawn Treader in 2 weeks from now, I'm going to start by talking about a book called Planet Narnia by Michael Ward, teaches for us. And he made this brilliant discovery that the 7 Chronicles of Narnia seem very clear to be linked to the 7 medieval planets and the way they influence us. So I'll talk about that later, because I want to get through Prince Caspian today.
Come on.
We did take a whole lecture to do that. We'll get back to that.
Why did you mention it then?
I got you waiting.
Damn it, Doctor.
Oh, man. Reminds me of the girls that would drive you crazy in high school. Did you know what happened? And they get all excited. They're like, oh, I can't tell you. I'll get in trouble. And they run off. Smack them. So I'm sorry I've done that. But anyway, but it'll come. It'll give you a sense of yearning, anticipation, waiting. It's really cool stuff. But anyway, my son even got to take some classes with him in the online apologetics. But Narnia, like the Middle Ages, is a world that's alive with meaning. You see, today, the universe is just our house. For the medievals, the universe was their home. Right? They felt a more of a linkage than we do. It wasn't just dead, cold space. It was warm and alive. And again, we'll talk about that more. But again, that's a real C.S. Lewisism to speak about the dance of the stars and the meaningfulness of the universe. Wonderful stuff. Okay, now he says, from now on, whenever we talk about old Narnia, we have to do it up here where nobody can hear us. Because Cornelius knows that there's a thought police. Have you heard that phrase from 1984? The thought police who wants to know what you're thinking and want to crush it. Don't even think this. And then he goes on to explain to him, right? Page 338 at the bottom. All you have heard about old Narnia is true. So excited. It is not the land of man, it is the country of Aslan, the country of the walking trees. He goes on. All the stuff, right? And he says, it is the Telmarines who silence the beasts, the talking animals, and the trees and the fountains, and who killed and drove away the dwarfs and fauns, and are now trying to cover up even the memory of them. The king does not allow them to be spoken of. Wow. It is again, and I hate to say it, but have you heard about speech codes? In the big universities where you just certain things you can't say, the shouting down of speakers. This is unbelievable that this would happen in university where it's about, I mean, it's a wonderful irony that you have to go to like a conservative, old-fashioned place like HBU to have freedom of speech. I mean, it's kind of crazy, but we can, we can talk about Darwin, Marx, Freud, Nietzsche, anybody over here. We're not censoring anything. But again, this shouting down. There's certain things that you just can't say, and if they can find out you think it. I mean, you've heard this. I mean, these public figures that they find something they tweeted 10 years ago and they use it against them. It's like you're not only being attacked for believing it, but for even having thought it once or vocalized it. This is what's going on. This is the scarier thought police of Narnia and the way they're crushing the animals. And he goes on, and suddenly, what realization does Caspian make about Cornelius? What is he?
He's a
Dwarf, right? Turns out he's a half dwarf, a half and halfer, right? And he says,
Not a pure dwarf.
not a pure dwarf, right? But he's dwarf. And then it's the next page, 339. So you guessed it in the end, said Dr. Cornelius, or guessed it nearly right. I'm not a pure dwarf. I have human blood in me too. Many dwarves escaped in the great battles and lived on, shaving their beards and wearing high-heeled shoes and pretending to be men. That kind of sounds ridiculous. It would have been better if he said wearing platform shoes. I just suddenly had an image of Dr. Cornelius as a what do you call those people? Drag queen, cross-dresser. Yeah, not transgender, cross-dresser. It's just suddenly, so he means like platform shoes, I think, not high-heeled shoes. Just the image of Dr. Cornelius. It's just really too funny. What's that, Dr. Cornelius? Anyway, it's just really funny. So he says, they shave their beards, they have mixed with your Telmarines. I am one of those, only a half-dwarf. And if any of my kindred, the true dwarves, are still alive anywhere in the world, doubtless they would despise me and call me a traitor. But never in all these years have we forgotten our own people and all the other happy creatures of Narnia and the long lost days of freedom. They would consider him, what group of people did the Jews, in the time of Jesus, what group of people did the Jews consider to be half-breeds and look down on them?
Samaritans.
The Samaritans, right? And amazingly, Jesus speaks to that Samaritan woman at the well in John chapter 4. Right? They look, because they were literally half and halfers, because the northern kingdom of Israel, the 10 tribes, were taken into captivity by the Assyrians, and they eventually intermarried with everybody and sort of assimilated. And so they were looked at literally as sort of half-breeds. And also half-breeds in terms of religion, because they had a sort of, part of religion that wasn't really Judaism. It was part, but had a lot of mixture. So they looked down upon them. And again, Jesus reached out to them. But there's also something important here. And I really think, I'm glad that, God led me to a Christian school. But if I was teaching at a very secular school, if I'd been called there, I think maybe I could be like Dr. Cornelius. What do you mean by that?
Is that you would give exactly what your job required.
Right.
But then you have a smaller breakout group
Okay, good.
of believers, basically, where you go to a different point.
And what's that?
At the coffee shop.
At the coffee shop, very good. And this is important because sometimes real strict Christians might give another Christian a hard time because he doesn't speak up. And it's like if I speak up and lose my job, then I can't do any good at all, right? And so there's got to be a balance there, and it's going to be different for everybody. Everybody's got a different calling, right? But a good example of that. Can you think of two people in the Gospels who were followers of Jesus, but in secret? Otherwise, they would have been thrown out of the Sanhedrin and basically excommunicated by the Pharisees. There's two people. You know their names? He's thinking. Well, not so much Pontius Pilate because he wasn't a believer. I know you're thinking of the other guy.
At night.
Good. One visited Jesus at night in John chapter 3. Remember his name? Do we know his name? It almost sounded like you're saying it. It was Nicodemus. Okay? Nicodemus was a follower in secret, and the other guy was the one who gave Jesus his tomb. Remember his name?
Darius?
Was that?
Darius?
No, not Darius. No, on something of something. Joseph of Arimathea? You heard of Joseph of Arimathea? Okay? They were both in the Sanhedrin, that was the ruling Jewish body, and they were clearly followers, but they didn't speak out. But one of them, it was Joseph, I think, if he spoke out, he would have been thrown out. But what he tried to do is he tried to get Jesus a fair trial. And in the Gospels, it records where he says, come on now, do we condemn anybody without giving them a trial? So you see how they're trying to do something within that realm. Otherwise, they get thrown out and they can't do anything. And I think it's important, and of course, Lewis taught at a very secular school. And I think it's important that Cornelius is a must. Here's another maybe example of this. Anybody know who Naaman was? Ever heard the name Naaman? It's from the Old Testament. Naaman? N-A-M-A-A-N? Or is it N-A-A-M-A-N? Naaman the leper? Does that sound familiar now? Okay, Naaman was from...
I like we're playing Jeopardy and all losing.
We'll try. We'll get it over.
Alex Trebek, he's like, led to the bottom of the.
Okay, you're getting close. You're getting close. By the way, I knew somebody who was on the Jeopardy show, and he told me one thing about Jeopardy is if Alex Trebek is talking and he mispronounces anything, they stop it and refilm it. He said, we don't know that. But he knew that. Like he said, like he pronounced something French wrong or something, and they stop it and redo that because he only was sound good. And like, he's still going, isn't he? He's got like cancer or something. Is he still going?
Yeah, it's going to be a new season.
New season, okay.
And he's bringing back the guy who won all the money.
Okay, but that's good though, because he's got something bad. Is it pancreas? Yeah, it was one of the worst. Very, very low. So he's a tough guy though, if he can beat it. But anyway, I think just God likes to watch Jeopardy, so I was going to let him stay a little longer, because it's so cool. Okay, so Naaman the leper was from modern day Syria. He was in Assyria, probably from Damascus or something. And he had leprosy, and he heard about a certain guy named Elijah. Okay, remember, right? Elisha. And he heard there was a real prophet, and so he went there, and Elijah said to him, go wash in the river 7 times. And he's like, what? Don't I have rivers back in Assyria? What? And luckily he had a very smart aide who said, sir, if he asked you to do something difficult, wouldn't you do it? So I thought he'd wave his hand. So he went and did it, and he came out as, white as snow, restored. And he says, go in peace. But then Naaman says to him, he says, let me bring some earth from there. And then he says, but please, sir, I serve the king. And sometimes when the king goes into the temple where their gods are, he leans on me. Can I do that? And basically the implication is, yes, don't be worshiping that deity, okay? But I mean, to me, let's just give a very modern day example. We have a lot of students that are Buddhists. Well, let's say you're a Buddhist student and you decide to become Christian. Well, I still think that you have duties to your family, right? You can go to the temple with your family out of respect. I mean, if you're a Christian now, you shouldn't be worshiping if it's an idol, right? But I mean, you still have duties and responsibilities towards those people. And again, sometimes people that are really, really zealous are like, no, you can't compromise at all. But it's just important to me that the Bible gives us characters like Naaman and Nicodemus and Joseph Arimathea who can work within whatever we'll call it, a secular world, and still bear witness to God. Otherwise, you get kicked out. And like I said, everybody's got to make their own mind up, right? Just like some parents feel like they should send their kids to public school to be salt and light. I did that, right? Others feel like, no, I've got to homeschool them. There isn't a right or wrong answer. It's what you're called to do. And so Dr. Cornelius is somebody, he does what he can, right? And he says, and Caspian wants to know, what can I do, right? And he goes on and he says, I'm sorry, doctor, it wasn't my fault, I'm not saying these things to blame you, dear prince. You may well ask why I say them at all. But I have 2 reasons. Firstly, because my old heart has carried these secret memories so long that it aches with them and would burst if I did not whisper them to you. But secondly, for this, that when you become king, you may help us. For I know that you also, Telmarine though you are, love the old things. Right? And he says, I do. But how can I help? Okay, this is what he can do. This kid that has no power, but is there something he can do to serve ultimately Aslan? Look what he says. He says, you can be kind to the poor remnants of the dwarf people like myself. You can gather learned magicians and try to find a way of awakening the trees once more. You can search through all the nooks and wild places of the land to see if any fauns or talking beasts or dwarves are perhaps still alive in hiding. Is there a book in the Bible about a woman, a Jewish woman, whom God used to save her people? Ruth, that's close, not Ruth, but the other one. There's two books of the Bible named after a woman. Ruth, Esther, okay? Now, it's clear that at the end she does, but up until this point, Esther and Mordecai has kept her Jewish identity secret. Right? And then she finds herself a handsome Persian, Marcy, because she married Xerxes, Xerxes, the king of Persia. And so, but she kept that secret. That doesn't mean she denied her faith, but she knew she had to keep it secret. But then the crux moment came when she had to do it. And she could have said no, and the implication from Mordecai is God will choose someone else. But there, perhaps you were put here for such a time as this. And if you've ever heard that phrase from the book of Esther. So you're here now, so you can be there when it's needed. And then she did, and then she risked everything by going before the emperor and speaking up for the Jewish people and avoiding one of the first Holocausts, right? So again, there are things that you can do, right? Where is it? He says, do you think there are any left? Wow. I don't know. Sometimes I'm afraid there can't be. I have been looking for traces of them all my life. Sometimes I have thought I heard a dwarf drum in the mountains. Sometimes at night in the woods I thought I had caught a glimpse of fauns and satyrs dancing a long way off. But when I came to the place, there was never anything there. I have often despaired, but something always happens to start me hoping again. I don't know, but at least you can try to be a king like the high King Peter of old, and not like your uncle. Amanda, have you been looking for those things all your life?
What?
Just the fairies, the little people.
I have not.
Oh, come on, they're hiding in your art. I can see them there, right? Still looking, trying to find them and not giving up. Clinton's still looking over there, okay?
I'm looking for fairies.
There we go, okay? And,
I'm looking for love and all wrong.
oh, man. Anyway, it's funny. But he does. He's looking for glimpses of a richer world, and they just keep eluding him. Right? But he yearns. He seeks. And this is what C.S. Lewis brought to the world in some ways. Right? All of it is following that sense of joy and looking for a sort of magic that has been lost. It's still there, but it's been lost, and people are attracted to this, looking for it, right? Then it's true about the kings and queens? Certainly it is true, right? That was the golden age of Narnia. Well, did they live in this castle? This castle is a thing of yesterday. No, they lived at the castle of Cair Paravel, which of course is where the 4 children are right now, right? And now watch what happens. I love this. He says, but we believe it was far from here, down at the mouth of the great river on the very shore of the sea. Ugh! Do you mean in the black woods where all the ghosts live? Your Highness speaks as you have been taught, but it is all lies. There are no ghosts there. That is a story invented by the Telmarines. Your kings are in deadly fear of the sea because they can never quite forget that in all the stories, Aslan comes from over the sea. They don't want to go near it, and they don't want anyone else to go near it. So they have let the great woods grow up to cut their people off from the coast. But because they have quarreled with the trees, they are afraid of the woods. And because they are afraid of the woods, they imagine that they are full of ghosts. And the kings and great men, hating both the sea and the wood, partly believe these stories and partly encourage them. They feel safer if no one in Narnia dares to go down to the coast and look out to sea towards Aslan's land and the morning and the eastern end of the world. That is a pretty deep psychological study of how how hate leads to fear and fear leads to hate. And we do this and we blockade it and we guard ourselves from anything like that. Right? That's what they're doing.
I was going to say, isn't this the abolition of man sort of summarized?
It really is. And he talks about that. And this was written after that. So
Yeah, that's interesting.
yeah, they don't want us to think too closely about that. Or yearn for it or desire it, but there's something here. There is, and we live in a time where if you have a true desire for something fuller and richer, the people in your church might even stop you because we've all been bought into the modern world, whether we're religious or not religious, and it's like this over here is reason and science, and this over here is fairy tales, and there's nothing in between, right? But as I said before, for Lewis and Tolkien, Christianity was a true myth. Mythic because it speaks to us at a deep level, like Bacchus, but it just happens to have happened historically. But we try to protect ourselves. I mean, a good example of this is, I don't know if you've ever been in a church where everybody's been praying for revival, right? And then all of a sudden there is a revival amongst the young people. But they want to do crazy things like run off and become missionaries rather than go to business school and make money. And everybody gets mad. Talking about, or they start raising their hands in worship, and all the old people get nervous. And by the way, it's never the old people that get nervous. It's the middle-aged people. The old people, the older you get more relaxed, unless you're not maturing the way you should. But as you get older, you should be less judgmental. It's really middle-aged people and young people are even more judgmental of all. Right?
My hand's raised. My hand is raised. I was raising my hand.
Oh, good. Oh,
Marcus, you said a minute ago that fear leads to hate and hate leads
Okay.
to fear, which made me Google something. So Yoda,
oh,
fear is the path to the dark side. Fear leads to anger. Anger leads to hate. Hate leads to suffering.
oh, wow! Yoda has spoken.
Now say it in Yoda's voice.
Oh, you're
Oh, wait, that we'll encourage him slightly. Go ahead.
Fear leads to anger. Anger leads to hate. Hate leads to suffering.
Good at Yoda, you are. That was good.
I was like, when you read that, I was like, no.
That's exactly, you got it. I didn't see your hand, sorry. But this is it. I mean, understanding how do you know this actually happened historically? In 1541, there was a guy named Suleiman the Magnificent, and he was emperor of the Ottoman Empire. And in 1541, he went to the Holy Land, Jerusalem, and it had been said that the Messiah would come out of the gate. There was a gate there. Which one was it? It was the Golden Gate. And what he did was he sealed the gate and built a cemetery there. Because in Judaism, if you walk over a dead body, you're going to be defiled, right? And so it was almost like he was trying to stop it. So we actually have evidence that Suleiman, they tell you that if you go to the Holy Land, that he bricked up the wall, the gate, and put a cemetery there, which is sort of like we got to be careful. We want to stop any of this from coming back. We don't want to allow it in. Maybe it'll be true. So again, there is a depth to it there. Right? It's a sort of anti-medieval propaganda. Right? Okay, if we go to the next chapter, starts at page 341. And now we move ahead several years, and during these years, Uncle Miraz starts training Caspian. And he trains him in sword fighting and riding and swimming and diving, how to shoot with the bow, all of this sort of stuff. And it's kind of ironic that Uncle Miraz is training him in all these things, because what's going to happen pretty shortly? Caspian's going to take all those things he learned and you leave and use them against him. And remember, didn't I say that Lewis learned all of his logic from somebody named Kirkpatrick, who was an atheist? And then when Lewis became Christian, he didn't throw out the logic, but he used it to defend the very thing he'd attacked. What great liberator of the Jewish people grew up trained by the very people that he rescued his people from? Moses, right? He was raised by the Egyptians, right? They taught him all those things, and he probably learned a lot of leadership qualities that he then used to lead his people out of slavery in Egypt. Isn't that amazing? So I like to think of him here as that. So he learns all these different stories and right now, and again he starts listening and he starts realizing maybe Narnia is not such a happy place. He starts to realize that Uncle Miraz is actually cruel, and the cruel taxes and crushing people and all of that stuff. And then, and this is actually where the movie starts, something happens that changes everything. Uncle Miraz has a son, right? As long as he and his wife were childless, well, I'd rather at least have somebody of my blood succeed me. But as soon as he has a child of his own, this prince, who should have been king, because that's how it works, is in the way. And that's when Caspian, it's wonderful, because that's when Cornelius says, he says, have you listened to what I'm telling you? Okay? Have you listened? Have you ever wondered, it's page 342, just a little bit into the chapter, bottom of the page, I wonder why you have never asked me before, why being the son of King Caspian, you are not King Caspian yourself. Everyone except Her Majesty knows that Miraz is a usurper. When he first began to rule, he did not even pretend to be the king. He called himself Lord Protector. But then your royal mother died, the good queen and the only Telmarine who was ever kind to me. And then one by one, all the great lords who had known your father died or disappeared. Not by accident either. He weeded them out, one by one after another. He did this, he sent them. And then the 7 nobles that he couldn't, bribe or get rid of, he sent them to sea on a wild goose chase. Anybody know why that's important? Those 7 lost lords are going to become the plot point for the Voyage of the Dawn Treader. So, little spoiler alert here. It's unclear whether Lewis knew that he was going to write Voyage of the Dawn Treader when he wrote that. He might have had it in mind. But it's kind of neat, because the whole reason, when we get to the next book, that King Caspian is going on that journey is to find those 7 lost lords. Either find out they died or rescue them and bring them back. And a few of them turn out have died, others are still okay. He rescues others. So it's kind of neat. But he says, I still don't understand what's going on. He says, have I not taught you any history? Okay? Again, there is now an heir to Miraz. You are in the way. Would he murder me? Yes, he murdered your father. And that's page 343. Caspian felt very queer and said nothing. I can tell you the whole story, but not now. There is no time. You must fly at once. Will you come with me? I dare not. It would make your danger greater. 2 are more easily tracked than 1. Dear Prince, dear King Caspian, you must be very brave. You must go alone and at once try to get across the southern border to the court of Nain of Arkenland. We're going to learn about Arkenland and the horse and his boy. And he will be good to you. You need to flee, but you need to be strong. Do you remember who, basically God told him, you must be very strong and courageous, because this guy was following he was following a leader that was very hard to live up to. But God told him, be strong and very courageous. You know who that was?
Was it David?
Well, David, but is it somebody else who came after Moses? Who came after Moses? Do you know who followed Moses? No, not Job. You're close. It almost sounds like it. He's got a book in the Bible named after him. Matthew, Mark, Luke, John, Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy, and the next book is called Joshua. Okay?
All of them.
All of you, what's it?
All of us are losing it.
Yeah.
Oh, there we go. Yeah, you're losing. Yeah. Luckily, you're not being quizzed. You're not being quizzed on Bible knowledge. Don't worry.
Bueller.
Bueller?
Anyone?
That's right. You're a slacker. Anyway, Millsap, you're a slacker. Anyway, but the now that I think about it, that's kind of a cool name.
What's that?
Millsap. Is that a reference to it could almost be a reference to the making of syrup or
It's English from millsop, which was
making
the river of light. It's like a place over in jolly old England.
Okay.
So it was after the river of light, and then the other explanation was it came from milksop, which was sopping up bread with milk. Milksop.
Okay. You've tried it.
I like the one.
You like the first one, yeah. I think it's a little bit better.
Anything your book says?
Something like
Milk
that.
toast, yeah, that's right. Milksop. They did you say that? That's right.
I like that.
I don't know, Mills, I was just thinking of you making apple juice or something like that in mind. Anyway. But again, you've got to be brave, very brave. That's what Joshua was told. You've got to be brave and have courage and move forward and do it. So, yeah, that's right. That's Wizard of Oz. Very good. Be a lion, not a mouse. I only had the nerve. I can just see him doing that whole scene right now.
I can do it.
Oh my gosh. He's just a dandelion. Anyway, the shall I never shall,
Right. Can you imagine a mashup of Lion, Witch, and the Wardrobe and
Wizard of Oz, that's just great.
You think the two lions?
Yeah, that's right. Oh my gosh.
That's like a Monty Python.
That does sound, I'm surprised nobody's done it yet. There must be some place where they've done that. It's so funny.
Why should lose faith in me? Have we come that long?
They picked up part of me and they threw it there, and they picked up that and they threw it there. Oh, Scarecrow.
Yes.
Come on, what's the line?
I don't do Scarecrow, I just do the line.
Now, come on, what's the line? What's the line? He says, they hit me, and they picked up my arm, and they threw it over there, and they took this, and they threw it over there. And the Tin Man says, oh, Scarecrow, that's you all over. And you forget that famous line. Okay. Anyway. Shall I never see you again, said Caspian. I hope so, dear king. What friend have I in the wide world except you? And so go. That's when he gives him the horn. Here's Susan's horn. We already know from the first chapter or second chapter that Susan's horn is missing. Remember when they go into the trade? But see, he does a nice job of slowly bringing it together. And you need to go and head out. And then he leaves on his horse and he goes over. And this was always one of my favorite lines. It's on, let me see, it's page 344 towards the bottom. As King, he goes, all night he rode southward. He goes on and on and on. And the end of the paragraph says, but when the day came with a sprinkle of rain, and he looked about him and saw on every side unknown woods, wild heaths, and blue mountains, he thought how large and strange the world was, and felt frightened and small. Cornelius sends him into the wide world. Any of you grow up with Wind in the Willows? Do you know The Wind in the Willows? You might know the Disney movie of Nothing Up. It's a beautiful book. And that comes from the late Victorian age. And again, it's always the wide world. That's where, what are their names? Toad and Rat and Toad are going out to the wide world. And there's sort of a fear, a numinous fear. And that book had a big influence on Lewis, Wind in the Willows. Okay, now, we'll come back to this many times, but this is another thing that is so central to this book. I think it's one of the keenest insights in this book, and it gets left out of the movie because of the way we lose the whole flashback structure. Now, in this book, there are two main dwarves. Does anybody remember their names? Trumpkin and Nickabrick, right? Trumpkin and Nickabrick, right? And what's that?
He's a Trumpkin and Biden.
And Biden?
Wow.
Oh, that's cute. I didn't think about that. That's pretty good. There should be a joke about that. Anyway. Oh man. By the way, did you recognize, if you've seen Voyage of the Dawn, Prince Caspian, did you recognize the actor that played Trumpkin?
It's the same guy from Game of Thrones.
Yeah, from Game of Thrones. It's the dwarf guy from Game of Thrones. Peter Dinklage, his name is Peter Dinklage. He's a very good actor. But yeah, he's very good in that. Now, okay, Trumpkin and Nickabrick. Okay, Trumpkin goes on to be one of the great heroes of Narnia. Nickabrick goes evil, tries to bring back the White Witch, and is killed in an ignominious fashion. Now, here's the amazing thing. In the beginning, Nickabrick and Trumpkin are very similar. What do those two dwarves have in common when we first meet them and in the early parts of the book?
They both want to kill Prince Caspian?
Well, sort of. We'll get there. We'll get there. They were both suspicious. But there's something else. What do they both not believe in? Yeah. None of it, just the whole thing. Ask them the whole old king. None of them. They're both very much skeptics and cynics. They don't believe in any of that stuff. Who's this Aslan or whatnot? They're both sort of grouchy. They're both, in that sense, unbelievers, right? And they're both very practical and utilitarian. But even though they're both like that, they slowly start to separate and go in different directions. But, and this is the brilliance, and this is, again, it's not in the movie because it can't fit the new plot structure. There are lots of clues early on how they're going to diverge. And then this is one of them. It's actually Nickabrick that wants to kill Caspian. Why? I don't know if anybody picked up. Why does Trumpkin say we can't kill him? This is one of the things that, the ancient Greco-Roman world and the ancient Jewish world put a heavy premium on. It's one of the ways you show you're an ethical person is if you pay heed to what's called xenia. I wonder if remember that word, Paula?
I do.
You know what it means?
Xenia is the bearer of good gifts. And
Good.
so you get, when you do good things, you'll have safe passage and good, I'm not using the right word.
Okay, but you're getting that. That the xenia, it defines the relationship between what two people? The what and the what? I'm kind of getting it.
The gods and the...
Well, partly, but it's also the guest and the host.
Oh, that's right.
Right?
That's right.
So xenia means...
You're a good hostess.
Good.
So you want good xenia.
Good
That's
that you do
right.
that. So xenia means hospitality, right? And you never mistreat a guest that comes to your door. In fact, in Dante's Inferno, the absolute worst sin in the galaxy is betraying your Lord. And that, whether it's Jesus or Julius Caesar, right? But the second worst is betraying your guest or host. That's how highly it was considered in the Mediterranean world. You treat a guest well. And so Trumpkin says, we can't kill him. And this is, it's not quite the end of the, it's kind of hard, but it's in this book, it's page, where is it?
345.
345, thank you. Oh, did you find it there? Okay. Kill it, said another. We can't let it live. It would betray us. We ought to have killed it at once or else let it alone, said a third voice. We can't kill it now, not after we've taken it in and bandaged its head and all. It would be murdering a guest. You can't. Trumpkin still has the deep-set morality of guest and host in him. Now, in some ways he doesn't trust him at all, but he can't kill him. Nickabrick wants to kill him, but you can't do that. It goes on a little bit. Now don't let it talk you around with its pretty words, said the second voice. Horns and halibuts! Of course we're not going to murder it. For shame, Nickabrick. What do you say, Truffle Hunter? What should we say? We can't murder a guest. He realizes that he needs to be... you've got to find out who he is. Okay, there's just a sort of moral behavior, whereas Nickabrick is ready to kill him right away. There's something else that starts to happen here towards the end of the chapter. It's page 347, kind of 3 pages or so from the end of the chapter. He says, "This is the queerest thing I ever heard," said Trumpkin. "I don't like it," said Nickabrick. "I didn't know there were stories about us still told among the humans. The less they know about us, the better. That old nurse now, she'd better have held her tongue. And it's all mixed up with that tutor, a renegade dwarf. I hate him. I hate him worse than the humans. You mark my words, no good will come of it." Right from the beginning, Nickabrick hates Dr. Cornelius even before he meets him. But later on, Trumpkin's going to say, you can't blame him for his heritage, right? So again, there are these little clues that Trumpkin has a firmer sense. He knows right from wrong. He knows that you can't murder a guest even if you don't trust him. He knows that you can't simply dismiss Cornelius. It's not his fault that he's a half and halfer. That's what happens. When Cornelius shows up later, Nickabrick says, "Sire, shall I drive my sword through him?" "You will not." Okay, you can't blame him for his heritage. Okay, let's look a little more what happens here. It's kind of neat. Don't you go talking about things you don't understand. Nickelbrick said Truffle-Hunter was a badger. You dwarfs are as forgetful and changeable as the humans themselves. I'm a beast, I am, and a badger, what's more. We don't change. We hold on. And by the way, badgers are pretty scary dudes. You know what a wolverine is? A badger? They'll bite a hold of you and they won't let go. And a lot of commentators mention that what's nice about Lewis's animals is they really are animal-like. Right? I mean, the dogs are like dogs, and the badger here sort of suits the badger personality. So they're not just humans that are talking with animal shapes. They are animal. Lewis was a big animal lover. His house was full of all different animals and stuff. He says he might have even had 7 animals. Get it? 7? Okay, get it. You are the 7 from now on. You are like the 7. It's like a thing. It's really cool. Keep moving out of this. And I'm so scared of hitting that, knocking it up. Okay. He says, we don't change, we hold on. I say great good will come of it. This is the true king of Narnia. We've got here a true king coming back to Narnia. And we beasts remember, even if dwarves forget, that Narnia was never right except when the son of Adam was king. He understands that. Whistles and whirligigs, said Trumpkin. You don't mean you want to give the country to humans. See, he's still very cynical. He's not that different from Knickerbrick. Those small clues we'll see. I said nothing about that. It's not a men's country. It's not men's country. Who should know that better than me? But it's a country for a man to be king of. We badgers have long enough memories to know that. Why, bless us all. Wasn't the High King Peter a man? Do you believe all those old stories? Again, Trumpkin. See, Lewis loved these crotchety old fellows. And again, I think this is probably worse in the Protestant church than the Catholic church, although the more American you get. A lot of times, especially in the evangelical church, they don't know what to do with you if you're not the smiley, sweet, happy kind of person. They don't know there's no place for you if you're kind of crotchety. And that's a shame, right? And one thing about, the Middle Ages is that, a lot of, in the Middle Ages, this is kind of wild, but a lot of the Christians who, if they lived today, would be dismissed as sort of sociopathic and whatnot, were able to become great saints, monks and nuns who just devoted I think a lot of them, you study about them, some of them, like, some of those nuns did that thing where they basically stayed in one room for the rest of their life. But you know what? This is a person who I think if they lived today would be, maybe we'd say Asperger's, we say they didn't fit in, but instead they can become a great saint because there's a place for them. And I really believe that the modern day church just doesn't know what to do with these people. And Lewis loved them, okay? They can be crotchety old people, but they can use that for, and there's a real courage. Puddleglum, some of you already know about him. He's in the silver chair. Are these wonderful characters. Reepicheep, all these wonderful characters that don't fit in, but they can be heroes. They can be great heroes at the same time, which is wonderful. But again, at this point, he doesn't believe. I tell you, we don't change, we beasts. We don't forget. I believe in the High King Peter and the rest that reigned at Cair Paravel as firmly as I believe in Aslan himself. It's almost like he's reciting a what in church? Like a creed, exactly. And we call it, because credo in Latin is I believe. Some of you have heard what's called the Nicene Creed. I believe in one God, Father Almighty. And in Latin it's called the credo, because that's the first word, I believe. So this is a creed. This is what I believe, right? As firmly as that, I dare say, said Trumpkin. But who believes in Aslan nowadays? Again, he is a cynic, but he's clearly open. And he will show his courage and his nobility slowly. I'll just say a few of them because it takes too long to try to show you all the passages. So, number 1, he's not going to kill Caspian because he knows he's a guest. Number 2, he's not going to be cruel to Cornelius because he can't help his parentage. Another thing, later on, when they're gathering their army at Dancing Lawn, Knickerbrick and some of his fellow black dwarfs say, hey, there's some hags and werewolves. Shall we go bring them into the army? And Trumpkin refuses. And they said, oh, I don't think Aslan, would want them in the army. And Trumpkin says, I don't know about Aslan, but you wouldn't have me. So Trumpkin understands that, okay, we probably made, I don't know, I guess we probably couldn't have won the war without it, but in World War II, we, America, made a pact with the devil. Who do we agree to fight with? In World War II, we fought with Stalin, with Russia, with the Soviet Union, right? And we had trouble forever, okay? And Paula and I, didn't you think we would be stuck with the Soviet Union forever? Nobody thought they would go away. Now it's been 30 years, but that's it. No, it's not. We're gonna have World War III. We're stuck with it forever. Right? And do you know the reasoning that Churchill used? And it's something we should not live our lives by. It's the enemy of my enemy is my friend. And we did that in World War II, and I don't know. It's one of those hard things. I don't know if we could have won without. A lot of Russians fought, a lot of them died. But generally speaking just sort of standard morality, the enemy of my enemy is not my friend. The ends don't justify the means. And Nickabrick is ready to get help from anybody, Aslan or the White Witch. Whereas Trumpkin, even though he doesn't believe in Aslan, he is, atheist is maybe too strong a word, but he's a non-believer, he's a skeptic. He still understands that there's right and wrong. And we're the good guys, and we don't fight with hags and werewolves. So that shows another aspect of how he's different. Another one, and this is my favorite, and you'll think I'm making this up, but it's in the book. We know that Nickabrick is going to be the bad guy as opposed to Trumpkin because Nickabrick doesn't smoke and Nickabrick doesn't dance. Good old C.S. Lewis. C.S. Lewis is the closest that Baptists have to a saint, Saint Jack. But that boy could smoke and drink, I tell you, and joke and all. It's just kind of funny. It's ironic. I remember in one Baptist thing where they had a picture of Lewis, but they'd airbrushed out the cigarette that he always had, right? And sometimes we try to delude ourselves into thinking he only smoked a pipe, but no, he chain smoked cigarettes too. And he knew he was killing himself, but anyway, he could have lived. He died at 64. He probably could have lived to 80 if he took care of himself. But anyway, but it is. But what's the point? Okay, he doesn't smoke. He's not a smoker. He doesn't take a pipe. But the more important one is that he won't dance. And let me explain that. It's worth jumping ahead to show you that because it is important. 1 second. It is the very end of chapter 6, and it's page 353. But if you go to the sort of second to last chapter, second to last paragraph in chapter 6, all of a sudden the fawns show up and they start dancing. This is really fun. Fawns, cried Caspian, jumping up, and in a moment they were all round him. It took next to no time to explain the whole situation to them, and they accepted Caspian at once. Before he knew what he was doing, he found himself joining in the dance. Trumpkin, with heavier and jerkier movements, did likewise, and even Truffle Hunter hopped and lumbered about as best he could. Only Nickabrick stayed where he was, looking on in silence. What does Ecclesiastes say? There's a time for mourning and a time for dancing. You remember the movie Footloose, don't you? Well, like David, good, that's right, David danced before the ark. And who despised him?
King Saul's daughter.
Good, King Saul's daughter. Her name was Michal. And yes, she despised him in her heart, and God cursed her, and she was barren. Right? There is a time for mourning, but there's also a time for dancing. There is a time for laughter. And there's a time to join the dance of life. And that's something that Caspian refuses to do. You just find it at page 353. I'm sorry, that's something that Nickabrick refuses to do. He holds back from it. Another thing that distinguishes them is, and it's, again, a beautiful, beautiful line. It's at the end of the next chapter, chapter 7. At the end of the next chapter, which kind of finishes up the flashback, they're all holed up in Aslan's howl. There's no way we can escape, and they decide it's time to use the horn. Right? And Dr. Cornelius doesn't know what kind of help it will bring. It could bring Aslan. It could bring back the 4 children. They're not sure. And the other thing that Cornelius is not sure, I'm not sure who it will bring, but I'm also not sure where they will enter Narnia. Where will they come? And if you pick up what he thinks there are three most logical options to where they would show up. And one of them is right here in Aslan's house. They've basically built a huge mound over the table, stone table, right? And what are the other two places? Do you understand? Where did the kids originally come into Narnia?
Under the closet?
Through the closet, but where is that Narnia? The lamppost, lantern waist, they call it. So there, or Cair Paravel. Right? And as we find out, they came at Cair Paravel. And so what we have to do is we have to send, we don't have to send anybody here because we're here, but we need to send somebody to Lantern Waste, and we need to send someone else to Cair Paravel, to the ruins of Cair Paravel, to look for them. And they're deciding who would go and who wouldn't go. And on the top of page 360, this is the very end of chapter 7, they're going, and then all of a sudden, I won't go, said Nickabrick. With all these humans and beasts about, there must be a dwarf here to see that the dwarves are fairly treated. Thimbles and thunderstorms, said Trumpkin. Is that how you speak to the king? Send me, sire, I'll go. But I thought you didn't believe in the horn, Trumpkin. No more I do, your majesty. But what's that got to do with it? I might as well die in a wild goose chase as die here. You are my king. I know the difference between giving advice and taking orders. You've had my advice, and now it's the time for orders. That's what I love about Lewis. He teaches us what true nobility is. We've forgotten. We don't see that much anymore. The idea of the true gentleman. He understands that he is under the king. And he understands that I've given you my advice as an advisor, but my role is the role of obedience. And he understands that. Crotchety old guy, but he understands right and wrong. He understands that a guest is sacred. He understands that the enemy of my enemy is not my friend. He understands that there's a time to dance, even though Trumpkin dances like an engineer. You know, an engineer, was it your husband that's an engineer? No. Your husband's not an engineer, is he, Paula?
No.
Okay. But you know how an engineer dances? They dance sort of like the Frankenstein monster. But, you know, they tried, okay? These guys will... That's not you, is it?
No.
Okay.
It looks like the 8th grade.
Yeah, that's right, yeah. Boom, boom. But, hey, at least they get up and try, right? Even though they're heavy and jerky movements, they get up and try. So he knows this, and he knows he's got a duty and responsibility, and he knows that Nickabrick is wrong. No, you're here. And I love it, too. Later on, Nickabrick says, who always gets the worst duties? The dwarves. That's not even true, right? What do you mean? Who is mistreating the dwarves? He doesn't understand. Trumpkin has an inner nobility that will be reached and drawn upon, and he'll be taken in to the fullness of truth. He's ready. He does have, you meet crotchety people and you say they have a good heart. It means that there's an openness there and an inner nobility that's just waiting to shine, right? Just got to wipe all the old crust off the top and reveal that person. And Trumpkin, he'll still be crotchety, but he will become, and you can see that Aslan likes him, right away. And he begrudges the kids. He doesn't want to believe them at first, but eventually he admits it. All right, I was wrong. You beat me fair and square. And so he's got that ability. And again, I like it. We need more people like that. Again, people like that sometimes they're alienated from the church. They're kachi, but you need those people to keep us on track. To have a full body, you need all those different kinds of people. And it's like the ludicrous phrase we use. It comes from the Germans and the Dutch. Cleanliness is next to godliness. Now, I think it is good to have good hygiene, especially under a plague situation. But some of the filthiest people in all history were the saints. Okay, Saint Francis of Assisi was probably pretty filthy most of the time, right? And he was a saint, right? So I mean, again, we just get these ideas, and we have a certain mold of what that person should be like, and we don't realize, right? I mean, again, we don't want one person that was always depressed was Luther. Another person that was always depressed, very different than Luther, is Mother Teresa, who did not feel God's closeness and yet persisted on. She probably wasn't walking around on Jesus fuel like the evangelicals like to say, but she persisted, right? Even when she did not feel the presence of God, she continued on. And so, again, it's wonderful to have a character like Trumpkin. I think we could use more characters like that because they're so different. Wonderful stuff. Let's see. Oh, there's so much I want to talk about. Let me skip ahead here. Let me just, because I'm there. Look at the beginning of chapter 7. That's page 354. The very beginning of chapter 7. Just to see this, because this is so neat. All right, this is the first paragraph of chapter 7. The place where they had met the fawns was, of course, Dancing Lawn itself, and here Caspian and his friends remained till the night of the great council. All right. To sleep under the stars, to drink nothing but well water, and to live chiefly on nuts and wild fruit was a strange experience for Caspian after his bed with silken sheets and a tapestried chamber at the castle, with meals laid out on gold and silver dishes in the anteroom, and attendants ready at his call. But he had never enjoyed himself more. Never had sleep been more refreshing, nor food tasted more savory, and he began already to harden, and his face wore a kinglier look. What test has Caspian passed, proving he is the rightful king and lord? He's going to get his arrow of light. Did you say you were a Boy Scout? Who was a Boy Scout? Oh, no Boy Scouts here. Okay. You a Boy Scout? No? Yeah. Get your arrow of light. You see the test? What is he amazingly enjoying?
The great outdoors.
Yeah, the great outdoors. He's roughing it, I guess we would say. He's been spoiled, grew up in a castle. Go ahead, Amanda. This is it?
He's glamping.
Glamp? I haven't heard that word. Okay. Does that mean just letting it all hang out?
Glamorous camping.
Oh, okay. I guess I've heard that before. Glamorous camping. But here, now this is just regular. He shows that he is a true king, that he's not, dandy, that he's tough and strong, and once he's given the chance, he grows into his role. Again, just like Moses. Moses grew up a very pampered life, right? He grew up as the son of the Pharaoh's daughter, and all of that, and he was able to give it up, and found that he preferred that he actually preferred it. So, there's so much more we can talk about. But let's jump ahead to Lucy. Lucy tries to wake up the trees. I'm kind of jumping ahead. But she can't do it because Aslan's not there. But she tries. They almost come to life. Lucy is always the more sort of spiritual one. She's a little bit closer. Come on, Amanda, are you a Lucy? Do you like Lucy? Yeah, I can see as Lucy. She understands Aslan's moods a little bit better. She's the and by the way, Saint Lucia or Saint Lucia is the saint of light, of eyes, right? It's linked to light, and she always understands, and she sees Aslan, and then she wants the kids. Once she sees them, she wants her siblings to follow her, and so that's on page 373. It's it's kind of 2/3 of the way through chapter 9. What Lucy saw, and again, at page 373, she says, "The lion," said Lucy, "Aslan himself. Didn't you see?" Her face had changed completely, and her eyes shone. "Do you really mean? Where did you think you saw him, Susan? Don't talk like a grown-up," and she stamps her foot. I love that moment. What does she mean when she said, "Don't talk like a grown-up"? What is she doing?
Going back to really where they were in Narnia when they left.
Good.
Not believing her again.
Good. And then so if the kid says something, it's all fantasy. It can't be true. So where did you think you saw? No, I saw it. Okay. And already Susan, and she's moving away, and she's given into fears and stuff like that. And there's a wonderful moment here. I hope that the girls especially like this. Who stands up for Lucy when nobody will listen to her? Edmund. Why does Edmund say that?
Because of what happened before.
Yeah. You know, the first time Lucy did this, nobody believed her. I was the worst, and now I sort of owe it to her. I've got to believe her. Oh, Edmund, she says, and holds his hand, right? And it's a wonderful moment where Edmund shows that at the end of Lion the Witcher, he became Edmund the Just. And he's showing that he has actually learned for something, right? But the other ones won't do it. Peter won't do it. And again, I love Trumpkin. Trumpkin says, I'll follow the party. If the party splits, I'll follow the High King, because that's my allegiance. We've really lost that sense of what it means to have that kind of allegiance and good kind of obedience, a good kind of hierarchy that makes you more yourself rather than less yourself. A kind of hierarchy that doesn't crush, but allows you to know who you are and to live out the truth of that. And I really think we've lost that. I mean, that's why I'm so glad that the Lord of the Rings was made in Australia, because there's two aspects of the Frodo-Sam friendship that would have been changed if it was made by Americans. First of all, American movie would never allow Frodo and Sam to be so close and intimate, because people would think they're gay. And that's because we're not in touch with our masculinity. The Australians have no problem with that. But there's another thing I think they would have changed, and the movie at least maintains that Sam, well, he's friendly with Frodo, but who is he to Frodo? His servant, okay? And he always calls him Mr. Frodo. There's no Frodo here. It's Mr. And they maintain that sense. Go ahead. His gardener. He's really his gardener, right? But he's a servant. Yeah, I love that. He said, are you his bodyguard? His gardener. I just love that, right? And he's so great. But in other words, they maintain the fact that he is the gardener and servant of Frodo, but he still is a full person. His personality hasn't been crushed. That's hard to do. If anybody made that movie today in America, we just don't seem to understand that as much. Just a good example of that. And are you a fan of Sabrina? Have you ever seen Sabrina? And anyway, the original movie is with the lovely Audrey Hepburn, and her father is the chauffeur. And in the new movie, which was okay, I mean, it had Harrison Ford and stuff like that. It's worth watching. It's not as good as the first one. But it's interesting that now in modern America, we can't have this idea of a servant. And so they invent this ludicrous thing where it turns out that the chauffeur has all the money he needs, but he loves to read, and being a chauffeur gives him leisure to read. It's like, really? Did that even need to be in there? But it's almost like because we've lost any sense, it was even there in the 50s, that someone could be a servant and still have dignity. We just have to make everybody the same. I thought that was very revealing if you watch the new movie. It's still worth watching. But do see the old movie if you can. Are you a fan of Audrey Hepburn? She's ultimate class. I can see a little Audrey Hepburn in you, actually. Very good. She's classy. Anyway, I love what is it called? In Rome, Roman Holiday. I love Roman Holiday. Great movie. Anyway, okay, so they don't listen to her, and she gives up and follows them. And then she comes back and meets Aslan. So let's look at that passage, because that's really important. This is the Return of the Lion, so that's chapter 10. We're about 2/3 of the way into it, and it's page 379. Page 379. She sees them, she sees the trees, they're almost awake, and then suddenly, the very bottom of page 379, a circle of grass, smooth as a lawn, met her eyes, with dark trees dancing all round it. And then, oh joy, for he was there, the huge lion, shining white in the moonlight, with his huge black shadow underneath him. Wow. And she runs up and hugs him. Aslan, Aslan, dear Aslan, all of that stuff. And then she says to him a little farther, page 380, welcome, child, he said. Aslan, you're bigger. That is because you are older, little one. Not because you are? I am not. But every year you grow, you will find me bigger. What do you think that means? That's a great line. It's in the movie, but they kind of throw that line away too quickly. What does that
Grow
mean?
in faith every year, right?
Good.
Your faith grows.
And the more we grow in faith, the more we what?
No, you
Good.
don't know.
More, that's good. You kind of think of Socrates. We know more we know that we don't know, and the more dimensions we understand of God. As we grow, God's not getting bigger. We're getting bigger. He's always been there, but we're. Go ahead, Committee.
No.
You see that? And let me. This is different from what's sometimes called progressive revelation. It's not that we're figuring. It's God is revealing more of Himself because we are able to apprehend it somewhat. He couldn't show as much of Himself in the Old Testament, and now He can show. He doesn't change. Our ability to see Him changes. Even as have you ever heard? Somebody in their 20s say, my parents seem to be getting smarter. Now, what of course is happening there, Paul? It's funny.
Oh my God, they're on their own paying their own bills.
Yeah, now they start to realize, wait a minute. You're a teenager, you might be rebellious, and now it's like, wait a minute, maybe my parents knew more than I thought they knew,
I came back right after I graduated from college. I was like working for a year before I came back to Texas. I was still in Ohio. So when I got back, I walked in. I was raised from 14 on by my aunt and uncle, and I walked in to my aunt and uncle's house where I grew up. And I walked right up to my uncle, and I was like, when I was 17, I knew everything.
Oh, good.
I'm 23 now, and I realized I know nothing.
There we go. That's it. That was Socrates.
And then he just had a huge smile on his face, shook my hand. He was like, "Welcome home."
Every so often, I might get a student that might come back who's like an English teacher now, and they're like, "Man, now I understand why you were annoyed by our writing," or something like that. It's really kind of funny, So, again, she sees more of him. For a time, she was happy, so happy that she did not want to speak. "Lucy, we must not lie here for long. You have work in hand, and much time has been lost today." See, I don't know if you follow it, I don't know, but because they don't follow Aslan right away, they almost get killed.
Yeah.
Right? They get shot by arrows, they almost get killed. Also, we'll get there later, but that whole scene where they try to bring back the White Witch and Nickabrick is killed, if they had not wasted time, that whole thing might not have happened, right? Because they would have got there earlier. So there are consequences. There are consequences. Wasn't it a shame? I saw you all right. They wouldn't believe me. They're also... I'm sorry. I didn't mean to start slanging the others. But it wasn't my fault anyway, was it? And she's got to understand. Oh, Aslan, you don't mean it was... How could I couldn't have left the others and come up to you alone. How could I? Don't look at me like that. Well, I suppose I could. Yeah, and it wouldn't have been alone. I know, not if I was with you. But what would have been the good? You mean that it would have turned out all right somehow? But how? Please, Aslan, am I not to know? To know what would have happened, child? No. Nobody has ever told that. That's kind of sad. I hope we'll find out in heaven, okay? But now we don't know what would have happened if we'd done it the easier way. And, Aslan here, that would be sort of like the parent who tries to teach your kid and help them to avoid, let's say, the mistake that you made. And they don't. And it would have been easier, but you don't know how. Right? There are consequences now that come with it. No one's ever told what might have happened. That's part of what it means to live in time. Right? Oh dear. But anyone can find out what will happen. If you go back to the others now and wake them up and tell them you have seen me again and that you must all get up at once and follow me, what will happen? There is only one way of finding out. Do you mean that is what you want me to do? Yes, little one. Will the others see you too? Certainly not at first. Later on, it depends. But they won't believe me. It doesn't matter. Oh dear, and I was so pleased at finding you again, and I thought you'd let me stay, and I thought you'd come roaring in and frighten all the enemies away like last time, and now everything is going to be horrid. It is hard for you, little one, but things never happen the same way Right? That's what's difficult. What is the difference between prayer and voodoo? Okay? Voodoo is, and anything like magic of voodoo, is if you know exactly the right spell, the right incantation, the right ritual, you can make sure that God or the gods or the spirits or the ancestors do what you said. But that's not what prayer. If it be your will, Lord, and whenever you say in the name of Jesus, you're basically saying in your will or in keeping with your nature, I pray this. Things don't, and that's difficult. We want them to happen the same way. That's difficult. I will tell you it's more difficult for men. Women are better at changing. Okay. In fact, the best thing ever said about husbands and wives is true, that husbands get mad at their wives because they change. Wives get mad at their husbands because they don't change. Okay? And that is one thing I've seen true every single culture I've ever been to. Okay? So women are usually better at changing. But things don't happen the same way twice, okay? And have you tried to throw away your husband's old shirts that he refuses to throw away, even though they're full of holes?
Actually, he purges.
Oh, he's a purger, okay. You're the pack rat, that's funny. That's always the joke about the wife. Will you please throw that shirt away? No, I like this. It's really funny.
I'll wear it again when I'm skinny.
So, I think in my email
Go
to
ahead.
you about this section.
Oh, yeah.
With the references, because I feel like it's such a faith play.
Right.
On belief and everything else, and the fact that now this is the third time that
Good.
they sort of say no to Lucy, sort of like, no, we don't believe you, and that they're denying her
Good.
faith. And, you know, I don't have, I didn't know how that sort of, for whatever reason, I keep thinking of with the name Peter involved also
Right.
in the denying of Christ
Right.
3 times. So now they've denied Aslan 3
Right.
different times and not believing Lucy's take on the situation.
Oh, I see what you mean. That's true, too. If you're starting with the line, The Witch in the Wardrobe, you're saying.
Right.
Starting
Right.
back then.
Carrying it through.
It is true. They don't. They don't believe her. And it is difficult. And it's I mean, one of the best lines is that she's trying to get them to come, and they're not listening. And it says basically, I'll read you the line, because it actually is very, he says, she said it all over again. This is the end of the chapter. This was one of the worst parts of her job, for each time she said it, it sounded less convincing. Okay? And that is why in Christianity, fellowship is so important. Because when you are completely alone, I mean, again, Christianity is a fairy tale. It happens to be a fairy tale that's true, I believe, right? But I mean, if you keep saying it and you don't have any fellowship, it is pretty crazy. God became a man, came to the world, died for us, rose again. I mean, that's too good to be true anyway. I thought we had to work for ourselves. It's grace thing is too good to be true. And it is. I mean, when you're alone and you say it, it does sound like, no, that's just wish fulfillment or something like that, right? And by the way, did you all get the email I sent you of that artwork? Is that not amazing? It was a huge installation that filled up, that side room, that classroom that they put things in. It filled up that whole room. That's where that is. And when you see it, he's putting the walls up so you don't see, but the hands are reaching through back. I mean, it was a great. This guy's name is Seth Miller. I don't know if you ever met him. That's right. That was back in your time. You maybe or yeah. Great guy, Seth. And that's this idea that you're trying to have faith in the other person as they lead you forward. And sometimes people don't understand or don't see. Sometimes they can't see. Sometimes they won't see. But Lucy has to be strong. She can't give in to peer pressure the way we would say it. It's very, very difficult. Oh, just forget about it. It's not true. It's not there. And she's got to be, in that sense, a witness, a martyr. She's got to give them faith. And so slowly they see it. Notice that Edmund sees it first because he's got more faith, and then Peter, and then Susan hangs off. And Susan admits later, I knew it was true, but I sort of was afraid. Right? And I love when he says, whatever will I say to him? And he says, maybe you won't have to say much. Right? He says, daughter, you followed fears. Do so no more. And he is tender with her because those fears, they're scary. Right? You're on the brink of something that's really scary. It's intimate, right? Because we want to hold God at arm's length, right? It's like, just stay there. I'll follow the rules. Just don't get too close, okay? Don't get too close. Too close. It's like, no, that's it. He comes too close. That was something John Paul II said in Crossing the Threshold of Hope, that the scandal is God coming too close. We won't want him that close. It's like, no, don't, that's too intimate. That's too scary. I'm not laying everything on the line like that. And they're just tired. They don't want to believe, but slowly they see him. He's there. And so Lucy is someone who shows God to other people, right? You've seen that. People that you see God's love in their eyes. And so they are, I don't remember who first said this, but in some ways, every Christian is called to be Mary, because Mary was the first person who allowed Jesus to be born through her into the world. And in one sense, that's the calling of every Christian, whether you're male or female. We're allowing God to be born through us into the world, so that through us, they're seeing him, right? And that's scary, right? And again, I don't know if I said this before, but, we always say Virgin Mary, and of course she was the Virgin Mary, but because we always say that, we start to think that her greatest virtue was virginity. But I would argue that the greatest virtue that Mary had was courage. Why do you think I say that?
Oh, because she had to give up her son.
Yeah.
And watch him pass. In such a horrible way.
A sword will pierce your heart too. And what about when the Archangel Gabriel, came to her to announce it? As far as I can read the story, Mary could have said no. You didn't have to say yes. How did she show?
Screaming.
Yeah.
Realistically, if an angel shows up
Yes.
at your door, I'm not so sure that I would be so calm and cool.
That's right. You'd be like, it's like, oh, he's coming with the sword and stuff. And why did it take courage for her to accept God being born through her? What was the courage that she showed? First of all, what wasn't part of the deal? Gabriel never promised that he would do what? Tell who something?
Tell Joseph.
Yeah. What was Joseph about to do? Divorce her and send her away.
Or just get rid of,
Right, get rid of her. And so, as far as Mary knew, at the best, she would be a single mother in a society that doesn't have a safety net, kicked out of the only support she has, and at worst, she would be stoned to death as an adulteress. And it's just, as far as she knew, Joseph would do that. You think Joseph is going to believe it? The virgin birth is a one-time thing, right? It didn't happen before, it's not going to happen again, okay? Now, of course Joseph didn't believe it. Neither would you, right? And first of all, I don't think anybody in the village believed it. I'm sure everybody was counting on their fingers. Oh, it was a love child, that kind of stuff. And so Jesus grew up on it. But what I'm saying is Mary had courage. By accepting God into herself, she knew that she could be killed, lose the husband she loves, be kicked out, all of that sort of stuff. So courage, this is what Lucy shows. She persists and sometimes it shows more, sometimes it takes more courage to persist when people are laughing at you than when they're trying to kill you. I know that sounds kind of crazy, but especially in America, it's very, very difficult to persist when everybody's calling you a fool and laughing and saying you're childish and things like that. Say it again? Narrow-minded. Good. None of us want to be narrow-minded, right? We want to be open. We want to be, accepting of everything. And it is difficult, right? But Aslan, and what helps Lucy is she keeps her eyes fixed on Aslan, just like Edmund did in Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, and moving and following through. So, so like I said, none of you have to build that installation. I don't know how he did that thing. So don't worry. And now, one thing.
Let's have real expectations.
What?
Will build the installation, and we'll all do worse wrong.
That's true. Now, one thing that I would accept, and I have accepted, is if you have, like for this or whatever, like an incredible idea for an installation, you can't do it. You could go. I don't know what it's called, but there's computer programs where you can sort of build it on the computer and show us what you would do and explain it. And if you've got an idea for that could be one of the things that you do. And I just remember Seth did that for some of his other projects that he didn't have time and just worked it out, because you can do that now. It's pretty amazing. What's that? What is it called?
I don't know, but Stassi did the same thing.
Oh, that's right, yeah.
Some of her
Yeah.
paintings that she's just finished.
Yeah, she went on to finish. So yeah, there may be something that's so monumental you can't finish the whole thing, but you can show us what you've done, how you've mapped it out, and then discuss what you would do to continue on or something like that. You could do that as well, because we only have so much time, right? Okay, so they come here, and I love how he says, "Well done" to Edmund, right? Well done, you have been faithful. And then, I love, he says, "And now, where is this dwarf who does not believe in lions?" And he throws him up and down, back and forth. And of course, the kids can tell that Aslan likes him and all, but shall we be friends, son of earth? It's just a great moment that he can have fun and all that. And then, and Clinton mentioned this to me too, this is just ridiculous. They left out Bacchus. And the reason I say that's ridiculous is because the whole scene with Bacchus is so incredibly cinematic. Right? One of the things that movies do best, this goes all the way back to a famous and infamous movie called The Birth of a Nation. One of the things that D.W. Griffith did so well and taught everybody was what's called parallel editing, where there's like two things going on at the same time and you keep cutting back and forth. And generally what a movie maker will do, and it's sometimes called cross-cutting, is that you will cut back and forth more quickly as it's all moving to it. So somebody's coming and back and forth. And that would have been so exciting if we kept cutting back and forth between the duel and Bacchus and everything that's going on there, and it doesn't. And what really upset me about it is that what's really exciting about Prince Caspian is that the boys and the girls, there's three boys, I guess, if you include Caspian now, the three boys and the two girls are doing different things, but they're both important. And one is doing the more masculine thing, and I don't know. I would just think most girls, until academia has gotten a hold of them, and they were asked, would you rather fight in a battle or ride on the back of Aslan and wake up the trees? I would think most girls would choose the second, unless they're taught not to want to do that. And what they do in the movie is they leave all of that out, and they let Susan kill about 100 people. Okay? And we're losing the idea of how the two of them, it's kind of like the best parts of the Star Wars movies are when all the characters are doing something different and they have to work together to have a happy ending, right? So Luke is, always fighting somebody with a saber while they're doing this over there, and they're doing that, and it all comes together at a point. And so it is the girls who are more sensitive to nature. They're waking up nature. They're doing something feminine in a very high way. And that's what's happening. And that's all lost in the movie, which is really a shame, because it is so exciting. Right? Now, the duel, again, is well done. But let's look at the Bacchus part, because that is so exciting. First of all, and this is another question I asked you, what the heck is Bacchus doing in a children's book, right? The god of wine, women, and song. The god of UT frat boys, okay? What is he doing here? Who is this Bacchus?
Corn King.
He's one of the good, you remember it. He's one of those corn kings. That's what I talked about in the first lecture that I taped and sent to you all. He is one of those dying and rising gods. He fits that archetype of his life is tied to the cycle of the grape. And he's a demigod. His father was Zeus and his mother was a mortal woman.
Hercules.
But Hercules is like that too. Good. Yeah, Hercules is the son of Zeus. And he comes in. Wait, why are you laughing? I'm afraid. Wait. Oh, it's him? What did he do?
I didn't do that.
He said he makes you laugh when he makes faces, even when he's got a mask on. It's still like you can see the face, right, as you go through it. It's great fun. I love it, man. Oh, man. Are we going to just wake up from this whole thing? It's going on for 7 months. Maybe we're all dreaming the whole thing. Is it possible?
The students are supposed to go back on the 19th.
Oh, they changed their mind?
Yes.
Yeah.
Wait a minute. You mean September 19th?
Yeah.
No,
October. Oh, so it is a little sooner.
And Fort Bend is going back on the 28th.
I thought they're already back. Well, Katie's already back.
Yeah, Fort Bend going back 28th.
Wow.
Well, the
Is Bel Air coming back? Wait a minute. What's Bel Air doing?
Originally, second board meeting
Right.
to possibly extend at-home instruction until the end of the second 6 weeks.
Okay.
Because they were anticipating using the schools as polling sites.
Oh my gosh.
I heard that.
voting.
Yes.
I heard that.
Because there's the possibility of the polling sites being closed down because of all these things.
Oh my
Well,
gosh.
Multiple polling sites would be easier to get in with spacing. And stuff.
Spacing and all, that makes sense.
Because basically the classroom can be like four folds and.
Oh, wow.
But we got an email
Today?
today that says that we have to report and do instruction from the classroom starting at 12, which
Right.
is week 4, which basically means that we're going to be getting the classrooms ready during that week with kids actually coming out.
Well, part of the problem is that Abbott full rank on with Hidalgo and Turner and HIC's board and what their
Oh.
plans were for polling sites.
Yeah.
That happened yesterday, and they were filed in court.
Oh, really?
And so,
Huh.
not that, they had to go along with what the rest of the state was doing.
Yeah.
It wasn't up to our Harris County judge and the mayor to decide. Yeah, I mean, you can't close the schools when everybody else is, unless, there's.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That apply. And so,
Yeah, because
they're
that's
sort of trying to do away with, so.
kind of like what I saw, and I found that interesting that they're planning on prolonging it that far in advance.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden, it was like we got the email today, and it was just like.
Yeah.
Still open as well.
Who knows what's going to happen? Wild stuff, right? So, but again, Bacchus, sometimes we need Bacchus. We might call this a sort of divine madness or a divine revelry that restarts everything. And this is something that was stronger in the Middle Ages. It's still there somewhat. But what the medieval Catholic Church understood is there needs to be a balance between the feast and the fast. Right? A good example, probably the most famous example of that, the most famous fast is the Lenten fast. But what comes just before that?
Fat Tuesday.
Fat Tuesday, Mardi Gras, right? That is Mardi Gras is Fat Tuesday, and
This is actually the last parade in New Orleans. So
oh,
right before Rex is the big king, and then Bacchus is the final parade.
oh, that's right. Bacchus is part of that parade. That's right.
Is one of the crews, and it's the final parade.
That's right. I've seen that.
Uh-huh.
There's this idea of a sort of divine reverie, a madness that heals. Now, it's very important. At the end of the chapter, Susan says, I don't think I'd feel safe with all these crazy people if Aslan wasn't here.
Like Mardi Gras.
Yeah, and it said, Lucy, certainly not. But it is a Mardi Gras affair here that uses that to break open. An extreme version of this in the sort of evangelical world. Did anybody hear it? They overdid it, but it's called holy laughter. Have you ever heard about that? They're like these churches where everybody suddenly bursts into laughter. And I mean, I certainly think God can do that. The only danger is when the church decides, all right, we're going to have holy laughter every week. It's like, you missed the point, okay? Holy laughter is there to break you out. But if you do it every single week, then it's just as institutionalized as anything else, right? But there is a time when this is needed, right? And it comes out and goes. And I'll just show you the wonderful things that happen. It's all the way where it says how all were busy. And we'll jump ahead and then we'll go back. It's page, one second. Here it is. It's page 211. And we're how all were very busy. Chapter 14, which is a very long chapter. Basically, the first half is the duel, and then they jump over there. So, I'm sorry, I got that wrong. I'm sorry, page 407. I've got too many different numbers in my book. Page 407? What's that?
403.
Was that where it starts?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. Oh, so jump into 407 into that, and it starts with the. It's really cool, okay, because the duel ends and they start to fight, and then all of the people run and then they throw down their arms because the bridge is gone. That was a cool part in the movie. They tore down that bridge. You like that part, Clinton?
Yes.
By the way, I don't know if you were like me, but when you watched it, didn't you think that was a really cool CGI effect when that monster?
The river monster?
Yeah,
The water?
and then when the bridge was torn down.
I thought it looked like Peter Dinklage too.
Yeah, you know what?
I was like, that looks like Peter Dinklage too.
Now you know that the river, of course, the river god was CGI, but that was a real bridge. if you watch the special features, they actually went to some town in like Romania, someplace in Eastern Europe. They built that entire bridge. They lived in the town. They spent a fortune, and it was really cool. But I think everybody thought it was CGI. You know, they spent more money than they needed to on that movie. It's because everybody's trying to remake Lord of the Rings. But anyway, but that was a real bridge. I can't believe it. But anyway, the river god says, "Deliver me, deliver him from his chains." And the chains is the bridge. And so they tear down the bridge, and then they start going through the town, right? And then we'll start here on the very top of page 408. It says, "Everyone in the streets fled before their faces. The first house they came to was a school, a girls' school where a lot of Narnian girls with their hair done very tight and ugly tight collars round their necks and thick tickly stockings on their legs were having a history lesson." Oh, you know what this is? This is St. Agnes. Okay. The sort of history that was taught in Narnia under Miraz's rule was duller than the truest history you ever read and less true than the most exciting adventure story. This is what we call revisionist history, is what they're teaching, literally. And it's not exciting at all. "If you don't attend, Gwendolyn," said the mistress, "and stop looking out of the window, I shall give you an order." "But please, Mrs. Brizzle." And suddenly, everything comes in, and the desk turns into a giant flower, and all of that stuff, and they all run away in fear. Then she saw the line, screamed, and fled, and with her fled her class, who were mostly dumpy, prim little girls with fat legs. And that sounds even more like St. Agnes. But anyway, and off they run. But the one girl stays behind, right? Everybody else runs off, but the girl, "You'll stay with us, sweetheart?" "Oh, may I?" Thank you, said Gwendolyn. Instantly, she joined hands with two of the Meanids. Those are the Bacchae, or the followers, and off they run, right? So, at the girls' school, the mistress and most of the girls run off. They can't handle the new life, the joy, and they run off, but the girl joins in. But look what happens when we get to the boys' school. This is still, on page, very bottom of page 408. It says, "At a little town halfway to Beaver's Dam, where two rivers met, they came to another school where a tired-looking girl was teaching arithmetic to a number of boys who looked very much like pigs." We just moved over to straight Jesuit. She looked, we're having fun today. She looked out the window and saw the divine revelers singing up the street, and a stab of joy went through her heart. Aslan stopped right under the window and looked up at her. "Oh, don't," she said. "I'd love to, but I mustn't. I must stick to my work, and the children would be frightened if they saw you." "Frightened?" said the most timid. "Who's she talking to out of the window? Let's tell the inspector she talked to people out of the window when she ought to be teaching us." I want you to understand that in the second school, it's the teacher who joins and not the children. Because sometimes there can be an adult who is more truly childlike than the children. This is very C.S. Lewis to understand that. And what happens to all those little boys? They're turned into pigs. Come on, what's the scariest moment in all Disney cartoon animation history? Yeah, Pinocchio, when those boys turn into jackasses. That is one of the most terrifying, maybe still the most terrifying in all of Disney. Man, do anybody remember watching that as a kid? Did you ever see it?
Yeah.
The original Pinocchio?
I got scared watching that when I got scared watching Dumbo and all the elephants started dancing.
Yeah, the pink elephants on parade when they're drunk. Yeah, it's those original Disney, man, are just incredible. I mean, of course I like the princess ones, but Dumbo, Bambi, Pinocchio, Fantasia, those were all super artistic, much more so than the ones they made after. But he didn't make any money on them. That's why he switched over to the more cut and dry sort of stuff. But he didn't make any money. Even Fantasia didn't make any money because of World War II, really. But anyway, so. Who is it that's going to... It is the people whose heart is open, just like Trumpkin is. Trumpkin accepts, Nickabrick doesn't. But we can see something in them. As they move, suddenly they come up to a woman that's sick, right? And Aslan goes in and lifts up the whole house, right? And they come, and she's sitting there, and she says, this is so beautiful. We're still on 409, page 409. "Oh, Aslan, I knew it was true. I've been waiting for this all my life. Have you come to take me away?" "Yes, dearest, but not the long journey yet." So wonderful. In other words, it's not time to die. I've come, and he saves her, and all of a sudden the well water turns into wine. The wine was red as red currant jelly, smooth as oil, strong as beef, warming as tea, cool as dew. And she's healed, and she gets on Aslan's back, and they gather together, and she sees Caspian, and she runs to him and embraces him because it's his nurse. Such a beautiful moment. It's everything has come full circle. Everything has been redeemed and restored. And again, they can't do that in the movie because the nurse is not in the movie because we don't have the little kid. So you can't fault them for that, but it's a shame because there is a beauty of everything coming full circle. Okay, well, what about going back to chapter 12? It's the one called Sorcery and Sudden Vengeance. And this is when they almost bring back the White Witch. And we get a real insight into the nature of evil. Right? I guess it would begin at page 392. At the middle of the page, we meet. She turns out to be a hag, and I'm sorry, not there. Yeah, no, here it is. I'm trying to go too fast. I'm trying to go too fast. No, not okay. What's that?
Are we going to talk about the projects for next week?
Oh yeah, we'll talk about that. We'll talk about that. Let's just finish the scene, then we'll talk about it. So we've got that old woman. And she again says, nobody hates as well as I do on page 392. Wait a minute. Yeah, 392, the bottom. Yeah. For I hate him. Oh, yes, no one hates better than me. And then we meet the werewolf. I'm hunger, I'm thirst. Where I bite, I hold till I die. The movie kept that exactly word for word because they understand evil sometimes more than good, Hollywood. But they go back and forth, and they try to say to Nickabrick, look, the White Witch was a worse enemy than him. Are you going to try to bring the White Witch back? And he says, hey, look, when one thing doesn't work, let's try something else. And basically he says, either Aslan, is dead or doesn't exist or is our enemy. And he tries to use a phony version of the liar lunatic Lord, because what's the other option? He's on his way, but he's not here yet. You got to wait. God sometimes has an annoying way of making us wait to the last minute. But that's how faith is built up. And Screwtape, the devil says, the best thing is to get your patient to give up just 5 seconds before help is going to come. That's what happens to King Saul. He goes ahead and does the sacrifices he wasn't supposed to do. 5 seconds later, Samuel shows up. Saul, you weren't supposed to do that, buddy. Well, I got nervous, all that sort of stuff. Right? But again, once again, Nickabrick thinks the enemy of my enemy is my friend, and he's willing to give way to dark magic to do it. And he said, wait a minute, all the old tales say the witch is dead. And then the hag says, witches never really die. You can always get them back. Call up the blue fire. Now, of course, in the movie, they actually bring the White Witch back, and it's a really, really cool scene. But here, they stop them just in time, right? But it's a shame because Nickabrick ends up dying, right? And they said, maybe if he'd been in better times, he wouldn't have despaired like that. But again, basically what it says is he had gone sour inside, right? So, again, think about some of those things, and then again, that's most of the things. Aslan explains the full story at the end, who the Telmarines were, we makes the door. Let's talk a little bit about your projects. I could talk forever about these things, but again, and this, Anthony, you can listen more. The other ones don't have to listen as much. But again, you're going to find, and actually, if Marcy, if you need to go, you can go, because I'll just tell her, unless you want to listen. And by the way, Marcy, if you can come next week, do come, but you can skip it and it's okay, because we're just doing that. Because with COVID and stuff, don't worry about it. You'll be present. But if you want to come, you can. But you can skip to. You guys can't skip. And I don't know if we'll get Anthony. Hello, Anthony. We'll see if he comes and joins us. You guys can go kidnap him. bring them back or something like that. But bring them over here. But so we'll do that, and we may not take the whole time. We'll see. And I'm not going to be tape recording that because there's no reason to tape recording it anyway. I do my notes on the computer. But I don't know, because sometimes it's all linked through. If you want to try to show a PowerPoint, I think you would have to attach your PowerPoint, your laptop to this setup.
To that setup right there.
Yeah, to this setup, because apparently this no longer works. But yeah, it goes through that. So if you hook up your laptop to that, you should be able to show a PowerPoint if you want. Okay, that's sort of up to you whether you want a PowerPoint or not. And we'll figure that out. Okay, but once again, so have any of you thought of? I'm going to keep this running for Anthony, Kate, and Armando. You can shut it off at this point. But again, and I talk about it. It's page whatever it is of your what do you call that thing? It's page 3 of your syllabus and course pack. That again, you start. You'll come forward, and I don't know how we'll configure this. I guess I'll you come here. I'll sit over there with my laptop and take notes. You can come over here, and what you're going to do is you're going to begin by reading out loud. You will give us an introduction, okay, what interested you and stuff like that. But then read out loud at least one passage. There might be one or two. If it's a long passage, you can just summarize and read a little bit. But I want you to kind of dramatically read for, you have to memorize it, just read for us the passage and then talk about what in that passage inspired you. Sort of analyze that passage. Talk about what it means, what Lewis is saying through it, all of that sort of stuff. That's what you're doing. But then the harder part is once you've given us a sort of literary analysis of the passage, then I want you to move from a literary analysis to an artistic analysis. Try to break it down and talk about how you can move this from something literary in a book to something visual. So how you're transitioning from one to the other, right? And then you bring out your artwork and you take us through it. You sort of read it for us as you go through. Can you give any examples from what you did? It might be better coming from Paula because she did a bunch of these.
Sure. And so really, I always gave an introduction to sort of what my theme was and why I chose it, and then went in symbolically what the things meant, and then went into the passage, and then how I interpreted it, whether it was, I had a bird thing going through all of the Roman and Greek literature, so I used birds the entire 2 semesters. And so I brought in what they meant and all through the ages, so from way back from hieroglyphics to whatever. And so then how I presented that was my interpretation of the passage on a canvas, what I painted, and symbolically how it reflected onto the passage that I read. And it's really just a nice illustration, and Moto was a little more abstract with her.
Right, a little bit different,
always, and mine were more realistic. Chloe did everything from coming in outfits and playing characters to, and then Tanya and Brittany did a lot of computer animation type paintings. Robert did big sculptures in the hallway, which I think some of us had seen. And then, anyway, so and so just, it was interesting to see how everybody took it.
It was a little bit different.
But it was more important that it applied directly to the reading for any of us to get anything really out of it. Because we had a couple of times people didn't.
Right.
And just went off, into PETA. And which was like, what in the world does that have to do with anything? But brought it, you have to bring it back in a success.
Right.
And it's great because you get to talk about your art and really explain it.
And you're taking us on your artistic journey. Correct. This is where you started. What was the brand? And like I said, you may not necessarily be, somehow opening up a specific scene like the one I sent you. It might be more a theme that you see recurring in our theme of restoration, let's say. Right. And how are you bringing that to life? But you're taking us on a journey of how you go from a book that's a written medium and transition into a medium that's visual. And so you're taking us on that journey from the literary to what's called the aesthetic, to the artistic. And then you're taking us through your artwork, allowing it, opening up, reading. And then we always try to have a little bit of Q&A, and you can just lead a little bit of that discussion back and forth. And now, are some of you, have you come up, or you're almost there? Or? Again, it doesn't necessarily have to be a completely finished work, especially if it's something really big. Okay, but have enough to show us, what direction you're going in. Like for you could have something that's like in black and white, and it's going to be in color, but you just don't have time to get to color yet. But again, we want to see how, either this book or Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, or both of them, whatever, what was in there that fired your imagination. And again, hopefully you're taking it and putting it into your own idiom, your own, what you're trying to say, what you're trying to capture. And if you're trying to capture the idea of restoration, you might capture it in something that you're more used to. It's not going to be an illustration. And again, it may be purely abstract, but you're going to open up and read for us what you're trying to do with your abstract presentation of it.
And where you got your ideas, really, because that's the helpful part is when you're reading about the passages. I was always reading about, just so y'all know, if a bird flies on your left side, that's a really bad omen. You don't want a bird to ever fly on your left shoulder, ever. And so fly over you. That's just like death from the gods. Venus is coming, somebody's coming to get you. But if the bird flies on the right, that's always the correct path and the right way.
What if you turn around?
Yeah, well, if you turn around, that bird better be going with you.
And moving and things like that.
But I had to find the passages, and I read 2 or 3 of small passages of each, and so.
And of course, it could be any medium. It could be something sculpted, or clay, or something like that. And any medium you want. But are some of you moving in that direction? You kind of figured it out or thinking?
I'm thinking about it.
Yeah. And like I said, you use it. The whole idea is, how can you use sort of new material to flesh out more whatever your artistic vision is? Bring that in, what you're doing already, but you can use this to do that, to capture. I was just talking with Robert before. He's got one of those cool paintings that could be a sort of version of the stone table that has a sort of the kind of power that the stone table has, or even some of the faces that Clinton made. I look at them and I'm like, I can see sort of Edmund there. I can see the
Trumpkin and some of your ogre faces.
yeah, those kind of
War
things.
faces and
collage of some sort.
Good. And especially for you, I mean, it certainly when you do this, Amanda, certainly mix together your experience of it now as an adult with your experience of it as a child, and I think that could make a really
Pretty fitting because
yeah.
I'm dealing a lot with the theme of nostalgia.
Oh, good.
And a lot of what I'm doing now. So, yeah.
And that sort of, and it could be it's like I said, some of you that are doing contemporary things, I mean, it could be set in a different scene. It may not be the White Witch, but the same struggle that there is between the White Witch and Aslan might be moved to a different place. It could be moved to Mexico or something like that. I was looking at some of the stuff that Lupe made, and again, the just the idea of you might just be coming from these books with the idea of portals, right? Moving from one portal to another. That's there. You still see some of it. What is it? The back entrance over here, where the water fountain is. Right near that, you see that circle that's made out of plastic bottles. That was this incredible artist we had from. Where was he from? It was somewhere in Asia, Malaysia or something like that. And his circles for him were always portals of some kind or another. I got to teach him a long time ago. That guy was amazing. The exacting work he did with basically junk. And he would turn it into stuff that was thrown out and would turn it into these magical portals between worlds. So that idea might be something that grabs you, that you want to express.
I do have a question.
Oh, good.
Is for the two books is whatever we're creating only dealing with.
Well, if you want to draw from another book, that's okay, especially because you know them already. So if you want to draw from that, that's okay. That might be part of the collage or something like that. But again, I just love layered things like that. You're commenting on the book, but you're commenting on your reading of the book and your experiencing of the book over a long period of life and things like that. How you're doing it, and if you've got certain. I haven't seen too much of yours. I only saw your fireman. Yeah, I got to come in there and see it.
I'm be amazed at looking at this.
I know, yeah. There's just incredible things, but the idea of, just the idea of a world that's filled with meaning, right? And how we try to, I think of the Prince Caspian, how we try to close out and crush that meaning, but it still comes out. I mean, that's something you can do in a very abstract way. Even some of Carlos's stuff is pretty wild. Some of his abstractions. Now, some of his abstractions still have deep meaning from his. Were they Mayan? I don't know. His weren't Mayan. What were his? Anyway, but some. What?
I know one of them was about madness.
Maybe that's what it was. But I mean, so some of his do have some deep kind of folk tales behind them. But they're pretty abstract. It helps if he tells you. And what I'm saying is, you could have something like that. I guess most of you are actually a little bit more figural. I think this group, this is a pretty figural group. Now that I think of all the stuff I've seen,
Try to get away from it.
we try to get away from it. But that could be something. Or even if you're doing something, the fight between darkness and light, or summer and winter. The 100 years of winter, the thaw of that cold. And the gold mane of Ashland. I mean, if you're doing something more abstract, that would lend itself to that, certainly. Some of the did you saw some of the stuff that what's her name that was in your Michonne?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, she had done some of that stuff that was based on Narnia, and again, it was kind of in between. She was actually more of a figural person that was trying to experiment more. And then maybe you can all make masks for us, of Narnia instead of that. It's new. No, that's right. Yeah, and move it in there. But like you said,
something you've never seen before.
That's
like,
right.
This is new just for this class.
Yeah, that's right. You already shot yourself in the foot because you already sent me your lion. It's like, hey, this is new, But it can be a reworking of something you've done before, and you're expanding it and having more meat. It's like, oh, now I understand more of this. I know it's just going in more different directions at the same time now. Let it expand on that. And again, it's what I love about the Narnia books. They're layered, right? They've got a simple meaning, but there are layers of meaning under them. And you can do that with a collage, but you can do it with just various levels of paint, if nothing else. Or I was looking at the Clinton's where he's like using negative space as much as positive space to bring out this face and to give us a window into somebody's mind. So I'm excited to see what you all do with it. And feel free to shoot me an email, or I was going to try to drop by, but I had a bunch of things going on today, and I'll try to swing by your. I
made this just for your class, Dr. Marcos.
Oh, I got to see this.
This is made just